Madani economy framework and how is it transforming Malaysia's economic landscape? Explore the contributors to growth, key sectors and initiatives fueling Malaysia's economic expansion. Find out the importance of infrastructure development in driving Malaysia's economic success. I'm Zahir Kelvin Abdullah and this is Money Matters. A very good evening and welcome to your favorite channel, TV3, where you can also stream on Tonton. Today we have a very special episode for you coming from Sasana Kijang in Kuala Lumpur. We have with us Finance Minister 2, Datuk Seri Amir Hamzah Azizan, as well as Bank Negara Governor, Datuk Seri Abdul Rasheed Ghaffour. Welcome to Money Matters, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us, Kelvin.
It's a pleasure having you with us. Can I start off by asking you that the Ministry of Finance and Bank Negara Malaysia have been co-conducting international roadshows to engage with analysts and potential investors. We have seen positive investor reports here resulting from these sessions. Can you tell us more about what is shared in these sessions to build investor confidence?
I think, Kelvin, we started doing our roadshows in April this year. This is because we've been 9 months in government at that time, and it was important to actually present Malaysia in all the reform that it's actually doing in a different light. So now, actually what we're seeing is the results of the reform that's turning out, and it's actually really helping to position Malaysia into a new light. So when we go out and we tell the story, we tell a story of a rebirth Malaysia. We tell a story of Malaysia now that is looking at putting itself into the global arena like it used to be, but anchored in a frame that we've created through the Ekonomi Madani framework. Truly, the Ekonomi Madani framework anchors into 3 things. Yeah, first, how we lift the ceiling, which is about talking about how do you make the cake bigger. Because when you make the economic cake bigger, there's a lot of things there so that we can share, we can develop the economy in a better form. The second is talking about lifting the ceiling, the floor. Because it's important that the inequality, rebalancing in society also occurs so that everybody gets to participate in this space. Nobody gets left behind. And third is a very strong anchor, which is about talking about the governance, talking about efficiency, talking about how do we do it, and anchored by the values of the country. This is important because you need to have a framework that everybody understands how Malaysia is going on. And in the government, what we've done is, having got that framework, we've now anchored it with much more clearer plans that will facilitate the turnaround of the economy. You've seen us in the revision of the 12th Malaysia Plan. You've seen us put it out in terms of the new energy transition roadmap, the new industrial policy that we put in the plan. And it's giving clarity in terms of where does Malaysia want to take itself. And of course, one of the key tenets, because we're in the Ministry of Finance, I've got to talk about the fiscal discipline. And how does Malaysia put itself back in having core policies that anchor belief that it knows what it's doing, is anchored into the right frame along the way. And I think when you take the results of what we're seeing coming out, the clarity of plan, people out there like what they see. They believe in what they see. They see results turning out in true, tangible, executable elements. Right. So that's why it was important to go out, to tell the new Malaysia story. Second, to show the results that's coming out. And 3, build a path forward.
Right. So, Datuk Seri, what was your take on this regarding the co-conducting of the international roadshows?
Thank you, Kelvin. If I may echo what Minister has said, I'm glad that we had the sessions to meet with the investors. I think that gives us the opportunity to share the story of Malaysia in terms of what we are doing, a policy framework, in terms of, I think, the results that we are seeing right now. I think what I see is that there are 3 things that the investor appreciates. Number 1 is in terms of our coherent policy framework, in terms of the economic framework itself, in terms of the new industrial master plan, in terms of the national energy transition roadmap, and also the national semiconductor strategy. I think what they see is in terms of coherent regard to the policy or the objective that we want to achieve. Number one, in terms of attracting quality investments, in terms of creating high value-added activities in the country. And third, in terms of creating high-income jobs for the citizens of Malaysia. I think they have seen this and they appreciate this point. Second is that in terms of the growth story of Malaysia, I think they see the strong prospects of Malaysia and they see in terms of the track record of our growth story. I think if you look in terms of our growth in the past, if you look from 2011 to now, I think we have been growing at about 4.3% annually. And this is much higher than what we have seen in terms of the countries in the region, relatively. And so in terms of, if we were to take at the similar peer-rated countries, we are also above those countries. And the third is that in terms of the diversification of the Malaysian economy. So that's the main important point that I think they appreciate. We look in terms of we are very highly diversified, not just in terms of the structure of the economy, but also in terms of our product mix that we offer to the world, but also in terms of our trade partners. I think these are the points that they appreciate, and we observe that there has been a shift in terms of the investor sentiment. Minister mentioned about the outcome. Yes, we have seen the outcome. For example, I think we have seen in terms of a very healthy flow into the financial market. We have seen the equity market getting about $1 billion inflow year to date and increased by 15%. Even in the bond market, we saw the bond market having a net inflow of about $2.8 billion year to date. And this is about, I think, the positive sentiment that we saw in the investors. And in terms of, we looked at what regard to the holding government papers itself, I think it remains stable at 23%. So these are the outcome that we are seeing, very encouraging outcome from the roadshows that we have undertaken.
Right. Good to know. Datuk Governor, now can I ask you about macroeconomic indicators which are indeed looking good? Approved investments totaled over 329 billion ringgit last year. Can you tell us more about what's driving this growth trajectory?
All right. Thank you, Kevin. In fact, that was one of the questions that was raised by the investors as well, in terms of what are the factors driving our growth story. I think there are a number of factors there. First, in terms of we look at the private consumption, the household spending. We look in terms of private consumption, it grew by 6% second quarter of this year. Why is it so? Number one is there's support from the employment. If you look at the employment, I think we have a very strong labour market participation now, at about 70%. That's among the highest at this point of time. And second is that our unemployment has also come down. I think from the peak of 5.3% during the pandemic, now has come down to 3.3%, which is the level that we enjoyed pre-pandemic. And we also see an increase in terms of the income level. So that supports private consumption. Second is investment. In terms of, we are seeing investment coming into the country, I think 300 billion last year, and the first half of this year is about 160 billion, and it's going into the high quality investment, which creates high value-added activities, and also in terms of the high income jobs. That's very important. And we have seen this going into diversified sectors, and the E&E sectors, into the more, I would say, high value-added activities, like, for example, logic chips, like the advanced packaging, like the integrated circuit. So these are the areas that we want to move towards too. And secondly, also in terms of the non-E&E, that's also doing well in terms of like our construction material, our fabricated metals. Those are also enjoying some growth there. And second, in terms of the tourist arrival and also tourist spending, we have seen an increase in terms of tourist spending, about 22.4 billion for the second quarter this year, which is higher than what we have seen in the past. So this is something that is very positive, that's supporting our growth story. And we do see that this is sustainable, and it has legs, and it could carry us through into the second half of the year and also into 2025.
So Datuk Amir has also said just now that it helps to have political stability as well. What are your thoughts on this?
Certainly, political stability, macroeconomic stability does help in terms of the investors' confidence, in terms of investment into the country. And we have seen in terms of the outcome, as I shared earlier on, in terms of the investment that's coming in, also in terms of the interest from the investors that we have engaged with them. In fact, I think post the roadshow, we even receive follow-up questions from the investors. That shows that they are keen to know more about the country.
Right. Gentlemen, we have got to go for a very short break. Stay with us on Money Matters. We're talking to Finance Minister too, Datuk Seri Amir Hamzah Azizan, as well as Bank Negara Governor, Datuk Seri Abdul Rasheed Ghaffour. So stay with us. Welcome back to Money Matters. Datuk Seri, talking about the Gear Up initiatives and investments in key sectors, which involve government-linked investment companies, GLICs, amounting to 120 billion ringgit. Can you tell us more about this initiative?
I think what's good for Malaysia is good for the GLICs, also at the end of the day. The GLICs have always been a core supporter for the Malaysian economy. And if you look at going forward, they are going to invest normally about 440 billion ringgit. But going forward, what they have also committed is that they're going to increase that by another 120 billion over the next 5 years. But what they're doing is actually looking at their core mandates and looking at how to shore up their core mandates. If I give you an example, for example, in terms of organizations such as QAP, QAP is a government fund, and effectively it has the capacity to take risks on a longer term horizon because they don't have short-term requirements for the funds. So they are looking at how do you activate core markets in the private segment. Private markets are a bit light in Malaysia. So they're doing partnerships with other global investors and deploying funds in a Malaysian capacity, and at the same time developing local fund managers to be able to do it. So in essence, what they're doing is activating the private market, but developing capability within the country. If you look at EPF, EPF has always been concerned about how do you actually look after people who will get to retirement age. So if they have investments that can be invested in areas that shore up healthcare, that shore up aging infrastructure, that does that and gives them good returns, that's also good for the mandate that they actually run. So what Gear Up actually does is it crystallizes clarity of the mandate, but prioritizes also fundamental return that is within the mandates of the GLIC. So we'll see the GLICs commit into these areas that make sense to them.
So that is, Governor, your take on the initiatives for Gear Up?
Sure. I think Gear Up is certainly a very good initiative because our GLICs and GLC does have ample liquidity, investable funds that can be invested into the domestic investment. And domestic investment, as you know, Calvin, will definitely have strong domestic linkages. It creates jobs, it creates opportunities for the economy to grow even stronger. And one more point is that Malaysia is also a high saving nation. And our savings is also more than our investments. So therefore, I think we have a deposits of about 2.4 trillion ringgit. And these are something that we can deploy for our domestic investment, and this can create greater economic growth for the country.
Right. Datuk Seri, so we're still talking about Gear Up here and speaking about new sectors like the electrical and electronic sector and semicon also under Gear Up. But how does more traditional sectors like oil and gas, agriculture, commodities feature in our economy today?
No, we can't deny that the traditional sectors remain an important sector for us. And oil and gas is very core to the Malaysian economy, right? We still remain one of the major LNG exporters in the world. And we're developing a very strong downstream operations, particularly into petchem. So the government will continue to support more growth, more focus into these areas. But at the same time, as the world transitions due to climate change, we embrace new capability that comes out from the sector also. So for example, carbon capture and utilization and storage is a new segment that's coming up. And Petronas is also developing a Kasawari field to act as a carbon capture mechanism. And there are a couple more fields in the Peninsula of Malaysia that will also have the same characteristics. So from an old traditional, it can get refreshed into new, exciting new areas. At the same time, players like Tenaga are activating hybrid solar, for example, on the Kenyir Dam, where we'll be looking at about 2 gig of power coming out from Kenyir from a hybrid solar solution. Yeah? So there's a lot of potential, building on the strength of their capability, their engineering and their expertise, but venturing into newer segments in the same industry.
Okay. Now, looking at what you mentioned just now about the GLICs, right? So how much each GLIC will invest and the potential returns on these investments, according to analysts, remain quite unclear at this point?
No, I think the clarity that comes from the government is that we like for them to go and look at these areas within Malaysia, but they need to make sure whatever they put, whatever they invest, meets their mandate requirements. Yeah, because that can never be compromised. Yeah? So if you look at private markets have always been markets that return higher returns historically overseas. And domestically, what is clear is that the Malaysian private market, private equity and so on is an underdeveloped segment. So what Kuat was trying to do was to activate that. What Khazanah is trying to do with Dana Impact is also do the same thing. We actually experimented in Ministry of Finance about 5 years ago. We set up together with the SC investment where we're trying to get equity crowdfunding actually activated in Malaysia. And if you look at Malaysia's experience, we don't have very much experience in equity crowdfunding, so there was a lot of skepticism about that. So Ministry of Finance funded 200 million in ECF, but the rule of the game was very simple. We get the players to come in, but they do matching. MOF provides RM1, they provide 4. And then that money gets churned and cycled. So despite the fact that we put in at just as post-COVID, we put in 200 million, the fund that's actually there now is grown to 3.6 billion. What does that tell us? It tells us that there are a lot of entrepreneurial capability in Malaysia. What they need is to be activated. What does that also tell us? There's also ample liquidity that can be garnered and put into that side. So if a 1 billion can turn into a 3.6, the investments that get put in are actually very value generating. Yeah, if not, it wouldn't grow along that line. So what we want to do now is to find gaps that exist, shore up our capital market, put it in and release the capacity that exists.
Right. That is really, Governor. Do you have anything to add to what?
Sure. I agree with what Mr. has said. I think these traditional sectors, I think the mining, palm oil and also agriculture, they're still relevant. In fact, they're very important. In fact, these are our pre-existing strength. And what's more important is that how do we go forward on this? I think, for example, in terms of mining, we're going more into downstreaming. Palm oil as well, going more into downstreaming. Agriculture, we're going into more modern farming. So these are potential activity for the country. And let me just touch a little bit in terms of the financial sector. So this is also another area where there's strong potential there. That's why we are going into digitalization. We just licensed 5 digital banks and 3 has been in operations. So that's where they will be catering to the unserved and the underserved market. Second, we are focusing efforts into the sustainability area in terms of transition financing. So that's why we are helping and encouraging SMEs to move towards transition finance. And third, in terms of Islamic finance. So that's why we see strong potential there. We are pushing Islamic finance to leverage Islamic finance to push for the transition financing. So that's why we see a lot of potential and opportunities there that we can push forward, even for the financial sector.
Okay, we've just got to go for our final break. Stay with us on Money Matters and we'll be right back. Thank you for staying with us on Money Matters. Now, Datuk Sri, you mentioned just now on traditional sectors like oil and gas, agriculture and commodities. Now, MOF has also said that you urge the electrical and electronics E&E sector to approach skilled talent development holistically to ensure Malaysia pulls ahead of its competitors. But looking at this, what are the key challenges here?
I think the reality, every country that wants to walk into this space must create very strong and capable talent pool. Historically, we've been able to do that at the technician side and so on. But when we go up the value chain, we have to produce higher level of skill sets along the way. So what we would want is a whole nation approach, whereby the companies come together with the government We work at how we strengthen the curriculum that we produce. We would like training mechanisms that can actually do, and support that's actually put in, where everybody works to create good pipelines of talent that goes in, and the government will be committed to that. You've already seen the government commit to increasing TVET mechanisms and so on. You've already seen the government work together with other groups of people to bring together smart arrangements whereby students can get apprenticeship trainings and so on. So we just need to shore that one out so that we can do even better still as we move ahead.
Okay. Does your governor talent development in Malaysia, Bank Negara, Malaysia's take on how we can move forward where this is concerned?
Yeah, certainly, and we have invested quite a lot in terms of developing talents in the financial sector industry. I think we've established a number of talent institutions to ensure that what are the kind of talents that we need for the future. So one of the initiatives we have introduced recently is in terms of the future skills framework, in terms of identifying what will be the skills that's required as we move forward in the future, and where are the gaps that we see now, and how do we then, fill in the gap in terms of making sure that we have adequate talent that is equipped with the right talent towards, delivering, the new kind of jobs and expectations for the financial sector.
But do you think retaining the talent in Malaysia is a challenge?
Well, I think in terms of attracting talent, that's very critical. We have a very strong story in terms of the diversification of the economy, and more importantly for the financial sector, I think it is one of the strong growing sector. And I think that's where we are one of the leader in terms of Islamic finance, for example. So that's where I think the activity is happening in the region. It's happening in Malaysia with regard to development of Islamic finance, not just from the products perspective, but also in terms of the research and Sharia perspective. So this is itself acts as a magnet in terms of pulling or attracting talent to join or to be part of the growth story in Malaysia.
Okay.
I think it's important for us to also understand that when you look up about how do you retain talent, it's also about creating more opportunities in Malaysia. The better high-skilled jobs, the better high-value jobs it is, the more opportunities for our people to want to stay and to remain. That's why the focus of the government is actually how do you high-grade this? And if we high-grade it, we get talent coming back, we get talent staying, and commitment to actually grow talent is actually a very, very big element in Malaysia.
All right. Datuk Seri, final question for you. Given the continued importance of both traditional sectors, like you mentioned, like oil and gas, as well as industries, also like you mentioned, like E&E and semiconductors, how is the government ensuring that Malaysia's infrastructure development supports these diverse sectors?
I think Malaysia has always historically paid a lot of attention to infrastructure, right? So if you look at the various Rancangan Malaysia that have occurred, a lot of that has focused about putting in core infrastructures. The primary builder of growth in Peninsular Malaysia historically was the North-South Highway. That was a big project that opened up Malaysia now. Now we've seen double tracking actually come in, and hopefully by the end of next year we'll have the Gemas Johor Bahru link. So the double tracking will run all the way from Johor Bahru all the way up to Perlis coming up. So economic growth will migrate along that corridors that get opened up. We see the ECRL progress now on time, and maybe even have a chance to exceed the original planning. So it will open up the East Coast being connected to the West Coast. But more importantly, along that growth corridor, potential industries can come in. And that's important because making sure that growth is much more evenly spread is one of the key tenets of this government.
Okay. Any final words before we end the program, Datuk Seri Governor?
If I can just add to what Ms. has said in terms of infrastructure, I think it's important to really focus in terms of developing modern infrastructure. I think both the hard infrastructure and also the soft infrastructure. Minister mentioned about the hard infrastructure in terms of the railway, in terms of the highways and also logistics. But I think the soft infrastructure in terms of digitalization and 5G in particular is also an important infrastructure that the government is developing.
Right. And you must remember that when we talk about equalizing growth, attention is also spent for Sabah and Sarawak. The Pen Borneo Highway from Sarawak has now practically achieved 99% completion all the way, and we're convinced that will also open up development across Sarawak. We've begun now with the Pen Borneo Sabah. The first phase of Pen Borneo Sabah is now about 76% complete. So putting money behind infrastructure is the right thing to do. It equates and it rebalances back economy.
Right. Datuk Amir and Datuk Sri Abdul Rasheed, thank you very much for appearing on Money Matters. It's been a pleasure having you with us this week.
Thank you.
So for the past half an hour, you've been with us on Money Matters, but we are not done yet. In part 2 next week, we'll continue the discussion with the strengthening of the ringgit and, of course, what's in store for Budget 2025 for you, the Rakyat. So if you missed the earlier part of this episode, you can catch it up on Tonton. I'm Zahir Kelvin Abdullah, wishing you a great weekend.